At 61, Jim Carrey sat down for what he called his final interview. The man who made millions laugh was ready to tell the truth. For decades, fans suspected something dark behind his manic energy. They were right. In 2025, Carrey revealed he'd been on Prozac since the 1980s, battling what he called a low-level despair that never left. But that wasn't the shocking part. What he confessed about his father's suicide attempts and his own breaking point will change how you see every movie he ever made. Jim Carrey's story began on January 17, 1962, in the small, unassuming town of Newmarket, Ontario. He was the youngest of 4 children, born into a household where the walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm of anxiety. It was a noisy, cramped environment where the family's dreams were constantly in a head-on collision with the monthly bills. His father, Percy Carrey, was the emotional anchor of the home. Percy was a man with the soul of a jazz musician. He played the saxophone with a fervor that suggested he belonged on a stage in New Orleans, not behind a desk in Canada. However, the crushing weight of responsibility forced him to settle for an accounting job at Titan Wheels in Scarborough. He earned just $8,000 a year, a sum that barely kept the wolves from the door. Jim's mother, Kathleen, was a different kind of shadow in the house. She fought a revolving door of illnesses throughout his childhood, spending significantly more time bedridden than active. This instability defined Jim's early world. Even their identity was a compromise. The family name had originally been Carrey, but Percy's ancestors had anglicized it to Carrey upon arriving in Canada, a subtle erasure of their roots to fit into a new world. Inside that modest home, young Jim watched his father's quiet disappointment grow. He saw the toll that settling took on a man's spirit. He realized early on that even playing it safe didn't guarantee security. This realization birthed a manic drive in him. By the age of 8, Jim found his first stage, the bathroom mirror. He would stand there for hours, twisting his face into elastic, impossible shapes. To his siblings, it was a weird hobby. To Jim, it was a way to command a reality that felt increasingly out of control. By the age of 10, Jim's confidence had manifested into a bold ambition. He mailed a letter to Carol Burnett asserting that he was already a master of impressions and was ready for his close-up. He received a polite standard form letter in return, but to a boy living in financial and emotional strain, that piece of paper was a sacred contract. He taped it to his wall like a promise. School became his laboratory. He couldn't help himself. He turned every classroom into a theater, morphing into teachers and movie stars until the principal was forced to intervene. His peers began calling him Rubberface. In a world where money was scarce and his mother was often too ill to smile, those laughs from his classmates were pure gold. They were a confirmation that he existed and that he had power. The thin veneer of stability shattered in 1975. Titan Wheels shut down without warning. Percy, then 51 years old, was suddenly cast into the abyss of unemployment. He sent out 73 applications to accounting firms across Ontario, but the world had no room for an aging accountant. The family's savings evaporated in a heartbeat, and Kathleen's medical bills consumed whatever was left. Desperate to keep his family fed, Percy took a janitor's job for $4 an hour. Jim, at 13, watched the man he admired most mopping the floors of men who used to shake his hand as equals. The humiliation was visceral. Within months, they lost their home. From 1974 to 1976, the Carreys lived in a yellow Volkswagen camper van parked near Lake Ontario. Percy and Kathleen slept inside the cramped vehicle, while Jim and his brother John pitched a tent beside it. They endured freezing Canadian nights, waking up with frost on their sleeping bags. They washed their faces at gas station sinks before heading to school. Jim would often scavenge expired sandwiches from dumpsters, warming them over the van's small stove. Survival required the entire family to work. They took a night shift at a local factory, earning a combined $32 for 8 hours of cleaning toilets and scrubbing floors. Jim attended Aldershot High School during the day, but he was a ghost in the hallway. He was half asleep, his clothes were unwashed, and his mind was numb from the chemicals and the cold. By 15, his mother's illness worsened to the point where she could no longer walk. Jim began missing classes, and at 16, he officially dropped out to work full-time beside his father, earning $4.25 an hour. His life became a cycle of cleaning floors all night and coming home at dawn to lift his mother from her bed, wash her, and sit by her side. He discovered that the only way to keep her and himself sane was to crack jokes. Kathleen called him her little sunshine, but inside, Jim was paralyzed by terror. This cycle continued until 1980, but the psychological scars were permanent. In 1982, Jim found his father unconscious in the bathroom. Percy had swallowed a bottle of pills. Jim was 20 years old, screaming into the phone for help as paramedics rushed his father to Joseph Brandt Hospital. They saved him by mere minutes. Later, Percy admitted he had attempted suicide twice before during the van years. Jim carried this shock forever, fearing that the same darkness was a genetic inheritance. Despite the trauma, the fire for performance never died. When Jim was 15, Percy drove him to Toronto's Yuck Yucks Comedy Club. His mother had picked out a bright polyester leisure suit, convinced it was what stars wore. The act was a disaster. The audience barely clapped, but Percy, despite his own failures, drove Jim home with quiet pride. Jim learned a vital lesson that night. Failing on stage wasn't death, it was just a rehearsal. On his 16th birthday, he left school for good. While the family remained in the grip of poverty, Jim spent his 12-hour factory shifts dreaming of applause. He would sneak into comedy practice during breaks, mimicking icons like Don Adams and W.C. Fields. Comedy wasn't just a career path, it was a reason to breathe. As the family began to scatter under the weight of poverty and Percy sank deeper into depression, Kathleen's reliance on painkillers turned into a full-blown addiction. Jim later noted that being high on painkillers is a form of abandonment. He would sit at the dinner table as she spoke about her brain deteriorating, using laughter as a shield to hide the pain behind absurdity. At 17, he earned his first $20 for a 20-minute set at a club called The Hoft. It was proof of concept. In 1980, he auditioned for Saturday Night Live, but the producers passed before he even met Lorne Michaels. The rejection burned, but it fueled his reinvention. He stopped being a mimic and started becoming an architect of his own madness. In 1981, with only $200 in his pocket, he moved to Los Angeles. He lived a nomadic existence, sleeping on couches and eating free food at comedy clubs. By 1982, he was a regular at the Comedy Store, sharing the stage with legends like Richard Pryor and Robin Williams. Rodney Dangerfield eventually took notice, inviting Jim on tour. Jim was the youngest of the crew, opening for thousands, yet still so broke he could only afford to eat once a day. His early TV years were a struggle. In 1983, he earned just $50 a week for a sketch show called The Sex and Violence Family Hour. He lived in an empty apartment, sleeping on the floor and surviving on ramen noodles. His 1984 sitcom, The Duck Factory, was canceled after 13 episodes, plunging him back into debt.
Jim's first cinematic success came with Once Bitten in 1985, which earned $19 million on a tiny budget, but his personal life was a wreck. He was arrested for marijuana possession, had a brief affair with Mia Farrow, and began a dangerous reliance on cocaine to fuel his manic rehearsals. After 3 failed SNL auditions, he decided to lean into the strange. In 1990, at age 28, he joined In Living Color. He was the breakout star of a show built for the Wayans brothers. He created over 120 sketches, but Fire Marshal Bill was the crown jewel. With a melted face and a manic stare, he made audiences laugh and squirm. Behind the scenes, he was punishing his body, gaining or losing 20 pounds in a week for characters like Vera DeMilo. By 1992, he was earning $25,000 per episode, but the physical toll was mounting. He began using Adderall to stay awake through 80-hour weeks. As his fame exploded, his marriage to Melissa Womer, whom he had met on the set of The Duck Factory, disintegrated. Fame brought late nights, strip clubs, and a lack of balance. When they divorced in 1995, court documents painted a picture of a man consumed by his own success. In 1994, Jim Carrey achieved something no other actor has ever done. He released 3 consecutive #1 hits. It began with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. The film cost only $15 million, but grossed over $107 million worldwide. Jim improvised nearly 40% of his lines. He wasn't just acting, he was a force of nature. Overnight, kids everywhere were quoting, "Alrighty then." He beat out 19 other actors for the role, and the production was chaos. He famously clashed with Sean Young, leading to her being replaced by Courtney Cox. Jim was so deep in the character that he stopped showering and slept in Ace's apartment. For the sequel, When Nature Calls, he demanded $15 million plus gross points, one of the largest paydays in comedy history. The Mask followed, earning $352 million globally. It was a technical marvel, requiring over 200 scenes of visual effects. Jim wore the green prosthetic for 12 hours a day, often burning his skin. Then came Dumb and Dumber, which cost $17 million and made $270 million. Jim wrote 30% of Lloyd Christmas's lines, and the most annoying sound in the world was pure improvisation. However, the cost of this success was a total psychological breakdown. During the promo tour for Dumb and Dumber, Jim began hallucinating. He confessed to using cocaine to maintain his persona, calling himself a manic depressive clown. He felt like he was wearing a mask of happiness while his soul was rotting. In 1995, he even sued Warner Brothers for $20 million over the unauthorized use of his likeness in video games, a landmark case for celebrity image rights. Jim transitioned into drama with The Truman Show in 1998. Director Peter Weir pushed him to his breaking point. The boat escape sequence alone took 150 takes. Jim nearly drowned in the massive artificial ocean tank when a storm scene got too real. He refused to leave the set for weeks, wanting to inhabit Truman's isolation. He stopped calling his family and cut off the world. This dedication earned him a Golden Globe for Best Actor, but his relationship with Peter Weir was fractured over demands for a $20 million bonus. To play Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon, Jim lost 40 pounds and stayed in character 24/7. He frustrated his co-stars, including Danny DeVito, by refusing to break character. In one scene, he injected himself with saline to mimic the look of cancer. The film made $50 million, and Jim won his second Golden Globe, but he admitted it was a form of self-destruction. During this time, he divorced Lauren Holly after only 1 year of marriage. When Jim played the Grinch in 2000, he spent 2.5 hours daily in a prosthetic suit that made him feel buried alive. The makeup team actually won an Oscar, but Jim walked away with chronic back pain and exhaustion. The film earned $345 million, but the physical cost was written in his bones. In 2015, Jim's on-and-off partner, Catriona White, died of a drug overdose. She left a note accusing Jim of mental abuse and providing the pills. Her estate filed a massive lawsuit, claiming Jim had given her STDs and abandoned her. Investigators found texts that suggested a dark dynamic. While the case was dismissed as extortion in 2018, the stains remained. Jim's performance in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind reflected this inner turmoil. He was lost in the role, often depressed and raw on set. By 2022, the low-level despair returned. Jim had been on Prozac since the 80s, but after a near-fatal bout of pneumonia in 2017, he quit the medication. He wanted to feel the pain rather than feel nothing. He began a spiritual journey, influenced by Eckhart Tolle, eventually stating in 2017 that there is no me. He returned for Sonic the Hedgehog in 2020 and 2024, reportedly receiving a $30 million deal for the third installment, with a script printed in 24-karat gold ink. He joked that he needed the money for all the stuff he bought, but the reality was simpler. He missed the magic.
By 2025, Jim Carrey's movies have earned over $1 billion. He has 2 Golden Globes, but no Oscar. He famously told the world that everyone should get rich and famous just to see that it doesn't fix anything. He spent his final active years painting and meditating, finding peace not in the applause, but in the surrender of the Jim Carrey persona. He finally understood that the only way to win the game was to stop playing it.